Okay, we are getting started right now. Looks like I'm on air. All right, the one thing I just got to post in this section is just a little Calendly link here. Get it going so I don't have not doing two things at once. A little tough for me to manage one thing at a time. All right, so I'm going to drop in the attendee chat right here the link to set a free 30-minute consultation in this next week. I am not Dr. Trinka. My name is Jacob Meyer. I know it's listed as Terry Trinka, the wonderful doctor at Integrated Health Systems. And so you can go ahead and click on that link there to sign up for a free 30-minute consultation. It's sort of no strings attached, and just seeing if you would like or a loved one would like to enter into individual therapy in congruence with our team approach at Integrated Health Systems. You would have available the extra services of the rest of the team as well, included in these packages. And so moving on to that, or from that, what I want people to do if they have a question, to just go ahead and drop that in the chat. I typically answer questions in between slides just to not break with the flow. I can lose my place a little bit and get a little bit off track. So I'll sort of flag that there's a question there, and then I'll be able to answer it in between. Okay. And so my name's Jacob Meyer, and today we're going to be talking about 3 ways to manage depression in our new normal that we're living in. We're living in such a different kind of time period right now, where people are really starting to struggle with their mental health. And we're seeing a lot of uptick in incidents in people reporting newer symptoms with their mental health, maybe people who have not struggled with things like depression or anxiety, those 2 main markers or symptoms that sort of present in our environment and interact with it in a way that is disruptive to us, disruptive to our internal stability, and typically pretty disruptive for the loved ones around us. And so I usually see these things as just signals to a deeper issue, and try to help people work through that. But before tangenting off too far into that, we'll sort of get going here, and I'll introduce a little bit more about myself. I'm very happy because I happen to be wearing the same shirt as in the picture there. Pretty good coincidence on this day. And so my name again is Jacob Meyer. I'm an LSW and a licensed addiction counselor. The LSWs, I'm a general therapist. I'm working towards my full licensure of LCSW. But I have a lot of experience clinically. All of my work has been done clinically. And as a matter of fact, you'll see a lot of LCSWs that have very little clinical experience, but that's neither here nor there for right now. My LAC is more focused in how I started my work in addiction treatment. Worked for about 2.5, 3 years up in Westminster at Behavioral Health Group. I got my start working with people in addiction, in trauma, polysubstance abuse, a high level of disruption within their lives. A lot at stake for them as well within their recovery. And so that's where I sort of cut my teeth in this field. I like to tell people I've heard it all, I've seen it all. There's nothing that you're going to really be able to tell me at this point that I haven't heard before. And I'm very, with that experience behind me and seeing just a very intense population for a long period of time, I was really able to enter into the field and understand human behavior as it experiences a lot of chronic stress in their life, and the slow movement and oftentimes very arduous movement with a lot of regression or relapse involved in progression. And so that I have found with my experience at Integrated Health Systems that population has a lot of similarities in terms of a chronic stress that they're dealing with. They're trying to get out from under. They don't know how to do it. There's a lot of self-blame involved as well. And our patients suffering from traumatic brain injuries, chronic illnesses, and people that are sort of at the end of the rope a little bit more in terms of what can they do to get better? How are they going to get better to be able to support their families in a more comprehensive way? So that's sort of how I got my start in this field. and it sort of pins right into my role at Integrated Health Systems. I've gotten a lot of experience here working with chronic illnesses, traumatic brain injuries, and just really working with our integrated approach, working as a team, collaborating with other team members, and really giving a specifically tailored style where we are coming at the patient from a couple different angles here, from the emotional perspectives, from all the therapies that Dr. Perry, Dr. Stedman, that Kate are doing with our patients as well. And we're really able to pin a lot of things together and sort of attack the issue from a lot of different angles. It's a little bit different than what people are used to. But when we see a patient really engaging with me, engaging with Dr. Stedman, Dr. Perry, they're really doing their brain therapies, they're really doing their individual therapy homework, people are really able to progress at a rapid rate. And they're able to feel, a lot of times coming in with a chronic illness can be very devastating. And you really see people very closed off. They're very beat up. They've been told that they're lying about this, and they're able to really step out. A lot of times feeling stronger than ever. A lot of times dealing with some chronic issues that have been underlying, at least from my perspective, in an emotional sense, that have just been hanging on them their entire life, and they really give themselves a chance to address these issues and to really take a pause with their life and to work on themselves. And so what I typically do at IHS, I do assessments typically with every single patient that comes in. During that time, I'm sort of looking to assess, what's the emotional health that you're walking in with? What are the type of chronic stressors that you're carrying right now? What does it mean for you to deal with chronic stress? How does your body and mind handle that in your life? Where does that stress go? Is that able to process out, or do you just have to sit with it? Do you have to bear it? Does it disrupt your sleep? Does it make you depressed? Does it make you anxious? All these things that it can do for you. And so if we see there's a need for individual therapy, or if there's just a need for maybe some stress reduction techniques, using evidence-based breath management techniques in a significant sort of structured way within our routine to be able to help calm our body down, move our body from that sympathetic engagement to our parasympathetic engagement. We're able to do just that as well. But I'm able to sort of assess the patient and their needs and their want to enter into individual therapy, seeing if that's useful for them, and sort of seeing, what's the plan here? Where do you want to be? How are we going to get there? And what's the logical progression towards that? So that's a little bit about my role in integrated health systems. And we're going to move on to talking about the coronavirus and depression here. I typically like to go on for about 45 minutes. I'll go a little bit over, but if people feel the need to leave or to get something to eat, that's totally fine. These are always posted afterwards as well, so you can view it in your own time. And so many changes happening with coronavirus and depression. And so these three main points that I'm going to sort of outline a little bit here and overview a little bit more as we go. These three main things: dealing with uncertainty, coping with isolation, and having a real lack of control within our daily life. And so that first part right here, dealing with uncertainty, what I will always say is that uncertainty is just the opposite of routine. Okay. And so when human beings typically thrive, and for the most part thrive in routine with smaller and more novel breaks. I'll come back to that in the next slide here. But human beings really are able to structure their sense of self through their daily tasks, their weekly tasks, their monthly tasks, their yearly tasks, even. All these traditions, these rituals that blend into our life give us a sense of coherence and flow within our life cycle. And so when a big level of uncertainty that no one is in control of, and that has affected every single person that lives in this country, something like the coronavirus, something that none of us have ever experienced before, are all dealing with at the same time. This has created a very high level of uncertainty within our daily, yearly, weekly, monthly life. Okay. And so one of the things that I want people to walk out with today is just to starting a conversation with yourself in terms of, how can I create some more certainty in my day? I'm not going to get really, really big on specifics for people to walk out with. I'm not going to prescribe you like do this, this, and this. This is more about starting that internal dialogue with yourself today. starting that internal dialogue or external dialogue with a loved one, starting that dialogue with your daily life, your weekly life, your monthly life, to create some sense of certainty that you can count on some structure in your daily life, or to manage your structure in a way that's more effective for your mental health. The second piece here is coping with isolation. And isolation we can define as being real, like we're in the woods, we're up in the Front Range, up in the Aspen Grove or in the Pines. Or this could just be a felt sense. We can be around a lot of people. We can be lonely in a crowd in that sense. And human beings are really not designed to feel isolated. Isolation makes us move towards the group, that felt sense. One of the things that people typically experience in a state of isolation is an emotion that is as powerful as shame. Something's not okay about this feeling right now. I need to drive myself back towards the group, back towards that sense of safety and connection. And isolation in itself, real or felt, can really start disrupting our nervous system as well. It can carry a sympathetic response. We don't feel okay. We don't feel safe. That's our body telling us, with our hard wiring within ourselves, that's not really updated for this iteration of culture, that, hey, you're not safe in this feeling right now. Because typically what would happen is people who are isolated are then vulnerable to attack and vulnerable to, unfortunately, an early death in that way. So isolation, real or felt, is something that's very, very critical in its relationship with depression. Isolation typically, like 100% of the time, comes with feelings of depression, symptoms of that prolonged sadness, that lack of motivation. People are typically feeling extremely alone in that feeling. The last thing we're going to cover today is a lack of control, and specifically how these events that are outside of our control, very similar to the sense of uncertainty, have given us an external sense of control. People in our culture really strive towards states of control. We want to know, we want to engender more and more certainty in our day. We're very smart creatures, and we can really build upon structures. We can refine them. We can make things really feel like they're in control for a lot of time. But from what I see from individual therapy, and I help people understand, is that there is no real sense of control. Control is extremely bounded within the human experience. And a lot of times the best we can do is learn how to flow with different emotions. If you start working with me, if you start talking about emotions with me in an assessment, we're likely going to talk about how do we flow with that wave? What's that wave like in terms of maybe something happened at work that day that was unexpected? Well, this wave hit. How am I going to flow with this wave? Maybe an emotion internally came up right now. What's happening right here? How can we be curious about this? How can I flow with this feeling rather than trying to tamp down, control, dismiss, turn away, or distract myself from? So these are these three main points that we're going to be talking about today. And we're not going to be talking as much about the getting into the nitty gritty details of specifics. Specifics are always tied to the person and their life and what will be relevant for them. So usually I do not talk about specifics in a more general discussion like this, but what we can talk about and what could be useful for everyone is simply opening that dialogue with themselves, starting to ask themselves these questions and seeing maybe what their answers might be with that. And so to kick off dealing with uncertainty here. All right. Uncertainty, again, is the opposite of routine. Human beings really thrive in this routine. And they thrive in routine with smaller breaks of uncertainty. So let's see. It sort of follows our weekly life. When we're getting up, we're going to work, we're dealing with the kids, we're dealing with our loved ones. There's a certain amount of monotony that we're able to plan for. That can become stale over time. Usually the weekends or the evenings are times where we use for those smaller doses of novelty that come in. We're able to break that up and sort of stimulate ourselves a little bit more. We're able to build upon routine to really focus our mind to where we want it to go. And routine allows us to really optimally focus, where we think our resources should go. And so a great example of this is decisional fatigue that a lot of people experience, we could say, in a place like DIA, at the Denver International Airport. And so it's really funny the amount of fatigue that will happen with someone just going to the airport, getting through security, going to the terminal, sitting down on a plane. But what's happening and why that might be so fatiguing is that we're making all these micro decisions that we're really not used to. We're dealing with a level of novelty that a lot of people simply aren't used to. And so there are probably issues with air quality on the planes, things of this nature that might fatigue us, dealing with that altitude and the compression. But what we see a lot is that when we're in a very, very novel situation, it creates a lot of new conscious decision making, and it takes a lot of energy for us. We can think of, let's say, the first week at a new job. We're going to feel really, really swamped there. All of these new things that we have to take in the process, and it can be very, very exhausting for our overall system. And so we can also think of this as a smooth running morning versus a very chaotic morning in that way. A smooth running morning is something where we don't have to think very much. We follow very structured routines, so we can sort of make a decision and say, I want to save all my decisions and the energy that goes along with that for my work, so I can focus harder at work, so I can feel like my energy is put there, and I've structured my morning to be able to get there. And so we can see how routine and dealing with some level of certainty within our life can really free up our mind to focus where we want to focus in our day. And so we can see how this clashes extremely so with the coronavirus and all these concerns. We are dealing with multiple levels of uncertainty. Our daily, monthly, and even yearly routine has been deeply affected by these continuous changes that people are experiencing, and they are really feeling the stress from it. At this point now, we're in August now, and this was all kicking off 5 months ago in March, really, but some rumblings before that. And so we've reached that level of reaching this new normal, but still with all the social unrest that's happened, our election coming up as well, the holidays coming up, people are really feeling the chronicity of the stress right now. We've adjusted, but it seems like our culture is really struggling to stabilize right now, and people are really worrying about the level of stress that they're experiencing. And so I want people to understand from this is that stress is normal in this occurrence. Everyone is experiencing it to some degree. And if you weren't feeling stress right now, it would simply not be natural for that. If things change, we have to change with it. If someone pushes us, we move backwards. If this is happening within our culture, it's going to simply impact us. And people will really get caught in some shame of, I feel like I'm not coping enough. I feel like I shouldn't be letting this affect me. But we can see with such a big event, how can it not affect you? Okay. And so in the face of all this, in the face of all this stress, understanding a little bit about routine and certainty, how that allows our mind to sort of hone in, how this national event has really disrupted that for us collectively. How can we create some certainty within our day? And some of the three things that I see is with structure, planning, and execution over time can help us feel more certain in our daily, weekly, and monthly routine. And obviously, this is very simple right now. Okay, if we structure ourselves more over a period of time, we will simply feel more certain in our day. We're going to feel more locked in, and we're going to feel more of a sense of control within our life. But simple is not easy in this way. Simple is climbing a 14er. It's just step after step, right? But we know a lot of things can go wrong in that, and there are a lot of things we're going to have to account for. So how do we create this outcome? Okay, of creating more certainty in our daily life. And the difficulty in this issue, in this question, is discovering this for yourself. There's no real clear solution here. And this, again, is opening this dialogue to create this relationship with yourself. This is really about learning to ask yourself and to be willing to be vulnerable in trying that new structure, in the planning of that structure, and executing that for probably at least a month at a time. It's about asking yourself that question of, what kind of structure do I want to live in my daily life? What kind of structure might help me brace against this kind of uncertainty that I'm experiencing? What about this is stressful for me? What is actually affecting me right now? And This is, again, is about enacting this structure and slowly calibrating it or changing it over time. And so, again, these are very, very simple questions right now. But I think what our listeners would and patients would be surprised at is how very much we end up reactive within our routine, and how very little we might have a dialogue with or be aware of. How do I actually feel right now? How does this all actually affect me? And what are some logical steps that I'm able to take for this? It's extremely surprising and sobering for me in terms of seeing patient after patient really struggling to ask themselves these questions, feeling like they have to endure certain stressors within their day that they feel like they have no control over in terms of making changes with. And so a lot of my job will be, hey, like what's actually going on here? What's bothering you? Let's really hone in on that. And you'd be surprised that people having a lot of breakthroughs and realizing, oh, this has been so normal for me to have to do this part of my routine, to be stressed when I get home, to have to hit that second shift of emails in the evening that really disrupts my sleep. And I feel like I'm always catching up. Just little examples of how these little things that accumulate in our daily life can really start affecting our stress levels. So the biggest questions I want you all to be asking yourselves in terms of creating certainty is, what are the things that are stressing me out? What might I be able to do in a logical progression to be able to mitigate that stress, to be able to counterbalance that stress that we're experiencing? And so just a little bit here about dealing with uncertainty, and again, opening up that conversation with ourselves. The most critical component that I'll probably hammer a lot, I believe a lot in repetition if people can't tell from listening to me right now, but the most important part of this webinar is, how can we open up this conversation with ourselves? How can we make a logical progression? How can we open up a dialogue with ourselves, with a loved one, for the betterment of our feelings of happiness and our mental health? Okay. And sort of moving on here. Okay. And so the next slide here, we're talking about isolation. Okay. And again, isolation can be real or it can be felt. And many people in this quarantine, and people were already dealing with this before the quarantine, a felt sense of isolation, a felt sense of our not feeling a lot of meaningful social connections. We're sort of backing up before the quarantine to explain that a little bit. There have been multiple articles out and people becoming depressed of the lack of meaning within the relationships, within their families, within their friend groups, the transience of relationships, the commonality of people of moving in young life as well, in later life, which creates this situation of we're sort of living a lifestyle as a culture that has been very, very rare in the past. People typically would grow up and experience life with the same people, around them for their entire life cycle for the most part. And so people were already struggling to sort of cope with what it means to have friendships, meaningful connections in modern culture. But then we add a stress on top of that as well, with forcing restrictions through the quarantine to help mitigate the spread of the coronavirus. So a big concept that I like to talk about is that if we have dysfunction in the system already, and then add another stress to that, we're naturally going to get more dysfunctional results. The system is only going to be stressed more. Okay. Stress and dysfunction do not mix. It does not make a positive. It only makes a negative in that way. And so, sort of moving on with isolation. Isolation is a stressor due to human beings being interdependent creatures. People co-regulate their nervous systems. And feeling isolated, again, is a stress on our nervous system. We seek safety with others. We are extremely interdependent in that way. Our social engagement system, that part of our nervous system, is really blocked. And also, a lot of what's happening right now as well is that a lot of face-to-face connections are being blocked. And that's sort of happening with people needing to talk on the phone more, them not being in a face-to-face setting, people having to struggle with the issues of talking over like telecommunication, like Zoom, or right now, where you'd be getting a lot better feel for me if you were actually sitting in the room. The camera really helps, but we're still not capturing all of what I'm trying to communicate with my language right now. There is a loss in that. Okay, and the issues as well with when I heard a great clinician say that when we wear a mask, when we're covering our face, that's a big issue in terms of sending a signal of threat to each other. And so we're not even able to connect when we're out in the public space with eye contact, giving each other a smile, making ourselves and others feel safe in each other's presence. And so another big issue we're seeing with this felt sense of isolation that can be real or felt is a loss of the rituals that we have that really bind us together. And gatherings are a real integral part of the social engagement system and development. Ceremonies such as, I'm sure everyone listening right now has not been able to go to a wedding. Maybe they've been disrupted in their spiritual worship in churches or temples or synagogues. Birthdays are disrupted, parties are disrupted, backyard barbecues are disrupted. All of our summer fun has really been disrupted. And people are really losing out on that fun. A lot of our healthy, engaging, and novel behaviors that switch up from our routine, that opportunity for us to connect and to really sort of relax and let loose a little bit, are being blocked. People are feeling at a loss with their activities, their summer rituals that they typically go through, and a loss of connection with what they feel is normal and what they can typically count on. And so I've been seeing some rumblings in terms of online of a lot of our fall traditions of maybe watching college football. A lot of football is being canceled right now, and people might say, well, it's just a game. It's just this does not matter for people. But hey, wait a second. This is a really big gathering place for people. This is a really big place where we're able to meet and connect under a common banner that really enacts a lot of pro-social behavior with us, where we're able to have a sense of novelty in our week, going to enjoy a game with loved ones or friends, being able to gather at a place, maybe for a cookout in a football game, baseball game, basketball game, you name it, where people gather. That's very, very important for our sense of connection. Okay, and that's at a very big loss right now. And we are surely heading into a time where our holiday and our holidays that we usually count on to be able to reconnect, especially with our family units. People travel several hundred or thousand miles to go and observe different religious ceremonies, observations, things like Thanksgiving, Christmas, the holidays in general, you name it. This year it's going to be very complicated, and that will be very disruptive to people's rituals come at the end of the year. And so a loss of our rituals means a big loss of connection in our life. And what I want people to do, again, opening this dialogue, is to try to ask themselves questions that will facilitate them to find connection within their life, and to not only connect with the needs of the loved ones, but also to connect with their specific needs with themselves. We relate externally to loved ones, to people within our life, but we also relate internally to ourselves as well. We have a relationship with ourselves. We have a relationship with those around us. And so what I want us to be able to think about is to find some coping strategies that we're able to come back to create this same dynamic of connection that we're used to. Okay. Again, the value of this process is finding this dialogue with ourselves and enacting it into the world. Okay. What I want people to ask themselves is, what has been making me feel isolated? How have I been pulled out of my comfort zone maybe in this quarantine? What is my comfort zone? What is the level of contact for me that is necessary for me to feel better, for me to feel more supported, for me to feel maybe more okay inside of myself? And what I will say is structuring this time typically is pretty beneficial. There's a big benefit of weekly contact with loved ones, with friends, with family, having someone we can talk to on a regular basis so we can sort of break past that sense of catching up chronic catching up that we might do with family members and friends of this maybe 2 to 3 month contact period. We give each other a call. We might talk for about an hour or so at a time, and we don't really have the chance to deepen within that relationship anymore. It's all about catching up, seeing what's going on, seeing if anything big is happening, checking in on a couple things, and now it's time to get off the phone. But with weekly contact, we're really able to deepen. Sometimes it can be a little bit monotonous, but it helps with people if they're not putting the pressure on terms of the time they need to talk with that person every week. That, I guess, is one specific thing that I see is beneficial. If we can get a weekly kind of contact, that can be very, very beneficial for us. And to sort of pursue the middle ground of not putting a lot of expectations on ourselves in terms of finding connection, creating new connections right now. It's just about satiating, fulfilling that need for connection with ourselves. So again, in opening this dialogue with ourselves, we're asking ourselves the question of how have I felt isolated by this experience right now? Am I living by myself? Am I living with other people? Do I get a sense of connection maybe by going back to work or even on Zoom calls with coworkers in that way? If I am feeling stressed, if I am feeling lonely, if I'm feeling alone, what are things that I can do to feel more connected in my space? What are the logical steps that I can take? How much is practical for me to feel satiated in this way? We don't need to be perfect. We're just looking for adequacy in this way. We might not have the time. We might not have the amount of connections that are there to optimize that, but anything is better than nothing in this situation. Human beings really suffer with depression and isolation when they're not able to connect with loved ones. Okay. Sort of moving on to our last main point here is a lack of control that people are experiencing. And in the counseling world, one of the hallmarks is an external locus of control and an internal locus of control. And what is associated with typically better mental health is this internal locus of control. And what we typically see is that as well in this graphic right now is that someone is able to push outwards into the world and see these changes. They know they can reasonably move through time and space, through the relational environment as well. And they have a general expectations that things are going to work out for me. Things that I will do will work, will have an effect on my environment. If I go into a job interview, I have a reasonable expectation that I will at least be considered with my skills, my acumen, my ability to communicate within the within the interview, excuse me. And I expect myself to put out effort into the world and to receive a reward. And so that is the opposite of an external locus of control. That's a feeling of the world really pushing into us, not expecting to have an effect on the world. And that things tend to spiral downwards from this space. Okay. The external locus of control is a substantial contributor to depression. We feel like in general, the world is happening to us and we have no say or participation in that. It makes us feel much more submissive towards the world. It can make us sort of feel that classic sense of shut down or feeling frozen in the face of stress. Okay, and so things tend to go from bad to worse. Enough things can happen and signal to ourselves that we're not in control. We didn't get that job. We didn't get that job from that interview. We might have gotten some negative feedback from a loved one, and boom, all of a sudden, this big overarching stress that's outside of everyone's control, all of the coronavirus and all the changes that have happened are now intermixed into that. Life really was not easy for everyone before this happened. And then we have this other major stress that's laid on top of it as well. And so we could see people that were in maybe a bad or dysfunctional situation experience this stress, and things tend to go from bad to worse with that. And an external locus of control, from what I've seen, typically spirals the person further into depressive symptoms. Okay, and so what I want people to ask themselves and to begin this dialogue with in this last section here of our three main points is understanding that they might have a lack of flow within their environment, because control is a word that I think I use maybe to grab people's attention a little bit more. But again, control is something that we simply are very, very bounded by. There's very, very little that we can actually control within our daily life, within our weekly life, monthly, yearly life in that way. I typically see control as more of an illusion with our environment in that way. But what we can do is experience a sense of flow or influence, and not so much that sense of absolute control. And this sense of flow, influence, control has really been disrupted on multiple levels here. Okay. All of our previous options have been disrupted and changed with all of the rapid changes that have taken place in our culture. So in beginning this sort of dialogue with ourselves, what I want people to ask is that, how can I begin to re-influence my environment and begin to flow with it again? And just starting with our immediate environment and working outwards from there. We will often find flow with what we can bring to ourselves, our immediate environment, and our immediate relationships. Beyond this, typically, is where people really struggle. Okay. And so we can find some influence in our immediate work environment, at home with our relationships, maybe with friendships as well. And so we can participate in that, we can have influences, but there still isn't that sense of real control there. Okay, and so I'm laying this out pretty specifically is because what I'm seeing so much of with patients and just in general with people right now, what they're struggling with is that social media and the news at large is extremely anxiety provoking and discouraging. And this, a big reason this is because we have participation in this. Everyone has that Facebook account. Everyone has the right to comment. Everyone has the different people they follow. But we have participation in this, but we do not have influence on it. Okay. There's no sense of flow that is typically created with that. And there's no sense of control or flow or influence that we have over news articles coming towards us, towards negative conversations happening on Facebook, towards maybe fights between friends and family members that are happening. Okay. And we have to ask ourselves maybe some hard questions in terms of, is it time to maybe take a break from things that I cannot create a flow with? Is it time for me to maybe focus more on my immediate environment to be able to garner more of a sense of flow and congruence with my daily life, rather than feeling the sense of assault or this sense of things coming at me all the time that I'm not able to change or to alter so I can feel more regulated in the face of that? Okay. Starting this dialogue with ourselves. What is making me feel maybe out of flow or like I've lost control in my daily life? What am I taking in my daily life that might be anxiety provoking or depressing for me? How do I actually feel after I view things like social media, Facebook, Instagram, things of that nature? How do I actually feel about reading news articles that might be, frankly, frightening for us to feel in our daily life? And so that's what I want people to sort of ask themselves is, what am I taking in that might be disrupting my sense of control or flow? What might I be able to do to alter that so I can reattain this sense of control and flow within my daily life? Okay, so again, with these three main points here, trying to give you all some decent information, some decent premises for why these issues are happening. But again, starting this internal dialogue with ourselves, starting our relationship with ourselves is extremely critical to be able to make relevant changes over a long period of time for ourselves and to better our mental health. Okay. So moving on from that, there are some benefits of psychotherapy that connect in with these themes. Psychotherapy can be a really, really great way to brace through levels of uncertainty, and that value of identifying what is wrong. Again, this dialogue happening in an external presence. with another, with me at Integrated Health Systems, being able to support and to be able to collect, what is all coming at me, and to be able to succinctly find the themes behind that, to see the underlying currents of meaning, to understand why this is an issue for you based within your life cycle, and helping you to find relevant solutions to that in understanding and empathy and compassion. Okay. And so another great thing that psychotherapy provides, especially in this time that we're dealing with a lot of isolation, is to be able to have a very deep connection that is specifically tailored to be empathetic and supportive to the person, to be able to really help them understand and to feel seen, heard, and validated in the world. The patient and therapist relationship is extremely critical for someone to internalize the sense of, I'm not alone. At least one person can understand what I'm going through. I can internalize this in myself and take this out into the world, so I'm not so distressed in my daily life. And another thing is finding what we can control or flow with, learning how to cultivate those feelings of flow, not only that come from our external environment, how we might respond to things like that, but also how they come from within us, emotions that happen to us so commonly. How do we surf those waves instead of crashing under them or joining with that wave? And so just some other general benefits of psychotherapy that I like to note during these is just having an experienced guide through this process. At this point in my career, I'm very, very clinically experienced. I've worked with a very wide array of patients. I've seen it and sort of heard it all, as I've said. And so having an experienced guide that's going to be able to aptly, locate and sort of hone in on where you're at, exactly where you're at and what you're experiencing, but also to be able to hone in and help guide you towards being where you want to go. What are the feelings you want to feel? What is the kind of life you want to be living, and having someone to really help support you in discovering that pathway there for yourself. The second point here is just being able to learn from within. I am only a guide. I don't direct people very much. I help people sort of elicit and bring out themselves into the room so they can really learn about themselves firsthand. I can tell people all sorts of great information, but the best teacher is always going to be yourself in the therapeutic relationship, and me just pointing out and reflecting things so you can sort of find that way, that pathway, cut that pathway for yourself in that regard. And the third point being regaining or strengthening the sense of self through the process. And so typically what we see is people struggling to integrate these stressors that they're going through in their life. They're typically at the point where they reach therapy, they're having a disintegrated response. They're really struggling with their daily life. They're extremely stressed, and they just need some relief in that. And through the process of therapy, through the process of connection, discovering sort of breakthroughs and setbacks that happen throughout the process, we're really able to integrate the stress that we were so disintegrated from, and then sort of rise to that stronger than we were before. People, it's sort of a funny thing to me as an aside of, people feel like therapy is about, having someone that's just sympathetic to you, just having someone that you can just go and cry to your problems about. But coming to therapy for me is, you're sort of coming to face some of your deepest and darkest issues. You're coming to face things that that feel like they're on top of you, and you're just trying to get out from under it. And through that process, we can become a lot more experienced within ourselves and a lot stronger than we used to feel. Okay. So in conclusion, I'm pretty frank about, we can and we should improve our emotional well-being. The better and stronger we can be as a human being in the sense of our potential as a human being, the better and stronger our environment around us is going to be. The more we can support others, the more wisdom and empathy and compassion that we can give to other people, the more we can help to show others the way. And this is a very, very hard process, because it simply is. All of what we're going through right now is extremely unprecedented. All the personal challenges that people were facing before COVID are not put on hold. this is all being stressed and we're all feeling it right now. So this is just a very difficult situation that we're all going through. And I think it's just a real time for us to be pretty frank about our emotional health with ourselves, the people who are listening right now. Just ask yourself that question, like, how have I been doing? You know, how have these points sort of impacted me tonight? What might the benefit of starting this internal dialogue be? How can I maybe, see a family member, close family member or friend struggling with this? Do I need to reach out to somebody? Could this information or could a therapeutic relationship be beneficial for me or a loved one? And just to be frank about that, I think coming to therapy has the least amount of stigma it probably ever has had. It's only getting easier and easier for people to come in, and I think hopefully pretty soon it's going to be looking at like, going to therapy is sort of like getting an oil change on your car. It's just a service that is a part of living in the world, and it's a part of maintaining just a healthy human being and making sure we're able to go to the places we want to go within our life. All right. Okay. And so in conclusion and sort of wrapping up here, we're usually on the radio here. Dr. Trinka is not on this slide right now, but those are on Mondays from 12:30 to 1 p.m. on KLZ The Source with the fantastic Scott Watley. Dr. Stedman, Dr. Maynard, and myself will typically be on there, and Dr. Trinka is also on there as well. We do telehealth at Integrated Health Systems. If people are uncomfortable with coming in person, we do have screening that takes place within the office for every single patient that comes in. We're trying to do our very best to keep everyone safe within the office and to make sure we're reducing and eliminating transmission. And again, you can call for a free 30-minute consultation at the number here by Googling Integrated Health Systems Denver, or you can just go ahead and click that link in the chat. I just want to thank everyone for joining me this evening. This will be posted as well. If you would like to watch it on your own time or have a family member or loved one watch it. And again, we're always here to support our patients at Integrated Health Systems. Please don't hesitate to call in or to schedule with the link in a consultation. We love talking with people and helping our community, and Integrated Health Systems really wants to be a support through these unprecedented times. So thank you everyone again for joining me tonight. I'm going to conclude us here, and you all have a great evening. All right. Until next time, you all take care. All right. Bye-bye.